Guys, in this video I'm going to give you a very strong reason not to use arrow functions in JavaScript. So if you are coding in JavaScript, you know that since version of the JavaScript changed to ES6, everyone started using arrow functions and got very comfortable with them. And pretty much I know many developers who have just stopped using the normal functions that used to exist before ES6 version of JavaScript. I think after watching this video, you will reconsider your ways of writing functions. So it's going to be a very informative video, so watch it till the end, and if you like the information that I am going to share with you, please subscribe and like this video. So let's get started. For those of you who do not know what is the difference between the normal function and the arrow function, I will write a syntax for both of these kinds of functions, and we will see what is the difference between writing a normal function and the arrow function. Let's write a simple function which takes two numbers as a parameter and logs the sum of these two numbers. So if we want to write it as a normal function, this is how we write it. So there is a function keyword, and then there is a name of the function. It takes two variables, a comma b, and it starts with the curly braces. And here we can write whatever logic we need to write inside this function. So in this function, I'll simply say console log a plus b. So this is the normal syntax of the function. Now let me call this function here and let's see the results. So I'm going to pass 5, 5. So if I save it, I can see the result is 10. So if I want to write the same function as an arrow function, how should I be changing the syntax of this function? Now let's write the same function as an arrow function. So I'm going to name this function as sum arrow. Now in this case, the syntax is little different. It's like the way we define variables. So I say that const sum arrow is equal to the parameters that it is going to take. Then I can write an arrow symbol, a curly braces, and then I can say console log a plus b. So both these functions are basically going to do the same job of summing up the two numbers that are passed to these functions. So if I call this sum, the result is 10, and if I call sum arrow and save it, the result is again 10. I would say logically there is no difference in how these two function operates. So why do I say that we should not use arrow functions in our logic? So why do you think we should not use this syntax in our coding practice? Both of these functions are practically doing the same thing, and this function arrow function syntax is more intuitive and easy to understand. So what is the reason we should not use this syntax? If you can guess, you can leave it in the comments, and if you are not able to guess why we should not use arrow functions, then keep watching the video and we will see a major difference between the normal function and the arrow function. So one major difference between these two syntax of writing a function is that, let's say if I define a function as a normal function and I call it here, I see the result as 10. So in case of the normal function where we define the function with a keyword called function, I have a flexibility to call this function anywhere in this file. By anywhere, I mean that I can even call this function at the top, and if I save it, it's going to give me the same result. The function is defined below, but it has been called at the top. So normally when we write all the code, we write a lot of helper functions. Basically what matters is the logic where we call these functions. So in this case, I have a flexibility to call this function at the top, or I can even call it at the bottom. But this is something which is not valid for the arrow functions, because in arrow functions you are defining the function and saving it in a variable. So if I call this arrow function here, I'm going to get a result of 10. But what if I call this arrow function at the top, just like the normal function? If I call it here, I'm going to get an error, and this error says that the sum arrow variable has been used before initialization, because sum arrow is basically a variable and this function has been saved inside this variable, so we cannot call this variable before even defining it. So this is the major drawback of the arrow functions. So now if I'm using a normal function, I have a flexibility to call it anywhere within the file as long as it is defined in that file. But in arrow functions, I don't have that flexibility. First I have to define the function, and I am only allowed to call this function below where the function is defined. I cannot call this function anywhere in this file, and this creates a lot of bugs while writing a code, and this is the reason I say that we should avoid using arrow functions. Now, it's not that you should completely avoid using arrow functions. You can use arrow functions at some places. For example, if I'm using this function within the main function, let's say if I'm using this function here within the function, then it's totally okay to use this syntax as an arrow function. But if I'm defining this function as an independent function, let's cut it from there and place it here. It's always better to use the normal way of defining a function, which is using a function keyword, some arrow. Now, if I convert this function to a normal function, now I can even call it before even defined at the top. Now this function is defined at line 7, but I'm calling it at line 5. So I got this flexibility, and this will help to reduce a lot of errors and bugs in the code. So if you like this information, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.